Welcome to Could Be Pretty Cool. If that name sounds familiar but a little different, you're right. We used to be Could Be Pretty Cool News, and this evolution feels like coming home. When we started this podcast, we framed it as news, stories about creators and innovators doing interesting work. But over time, we realized something. The conversations we were having weren't really news stories. They were something deeper. Honest exchanges with people building meaningful projects, sharing the lessons they've learned along the way. And that's not news. That's wisdom. And it deserves its own space. So we're expanding our lens. Could Be Pretty Cool is still about creativity, but we're embracing a broader definition of what that means. Yes, we'll talk to artists, musicians, filmmakers, and designers, but creativity lives in unexpected places too. In the entrepreneur rethinking what a sustainable business looks like. In the researcher uncovering new ways to measure the creative economy. In the community organizer building networks that make space for underrepresented voices. We'll be sitting down with global experts in creative economy theory and research, and we'll be talking with practitioners, the artists, founders, and innovators making it happen on the ground. Because understanding creativity means understanding both the big picture and the individual stories that shape it. Hi, I'm Casey Lueders, and this is Could Be Pretty Cool. For our first episode under this new direction, I couldn't think of a better guest than Tim Packer. Tim is a full-time artist who's been making his living from his work for the past 26 years. He runs the Tim Packer Art Academy, where he helps artists turn their practice into sustainable careers. And his new book, You Can Sell Your Art, is out now. But Tim's path to this life wasn't a straight line. And the detour he took before coming back to art is part of what makes his perspective so grounded. In our conversation, we get into what it actually takes to make a living as a creative, why so many artists stay stuck, and the mindset shifts that change everything. Very excited to have you as our first guest on the brand new season of Could Be Pretty Cool. So Tim, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just let the folks know a little bit more about what you do.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Tim Packer. I'm a full-time artist. I've been a successful full-time artist for the last 26 years. I also run an online art academy that help artists actually make a living from their work. I have my new book actually dropping on January 13th, You Can Sell Your Art, which is like a step-by-step guide to how to make a livable income as an artist. And I'm living the life way beyond my wildest dreams when I was a kid. But it wasn't a straight path. By the time I was 21, I'd had a succession of jobs in graphic design that were just not going where I wanted. There was so many more people who were more talented than me. And I just realized my dream of being an illustrator was not going to happen. I just wasn't talented enough. And so I walked away from that dream, and the Toronto Police Force was hiring. And that led to an 18-year career in law enforcement. And I just thought that, I guess, again, their talent is a thing you're given or you're not. I didn't have it and was never going to get it. So I thought, okay, this is plan B. And then in my mid-30s, I was exposed to the idea of the growth mindset for the first time. Although looking back, my parents said this to us all the time. You can do whatever you want to do if you're willing to work hard enough. But I, like a lot of people, thought when it came to the creative side of things, that wasn't really true. Like, if you want to be an accountant, fine. If you want to be a doctor, fine. But if you want to be an artist or a musician, you had to be sprinkled with that magic dust at birth. And I just came to the decision that I wasn't. And then when I was exposed to the growth mindset, that was the idea that your talent is not fixed or limited. Your talent is really unlimited. And your talent is just the sum total of your skills, knowledge, experience, and creativity. And you can dramatically improve all of those. And I thought, I still didn't buy into it, but I thought, let me live my life, because I thought, what if they're right? What if they're right? And that was what I wanted more than anything from the time I was a kid, was to actually make my living as an artist. And so I decided for a year I was going to behave as though I believed in it. And so it was like, okay, start scheduling painting at least 3 times a week, focusing on as well, looking at the things that I was weak at that I knew were really important in terms of being an artist, composition being probably the number one then, and just really started focusing on art like it was my job and doing the things I knew I needed to do to improve. And by the end of that first year, I had improved dramatically. And by the end of the third year, I'd been elected as a senior signature member of the Canadian Institute of Portrait Artists, the Canadian Society of Painters in Watercolor. I'd had my work exhibited in international shows. I'd won awards. I'd sold lots of paintings. And that's when my wife and I had the conversation about, you know what, I think maybe it's time to really go all in on this. So in 2000, I quit my job as a police officer, walked away from my pension, and started my life as an artist. And after 18 years on the police force, walking away from my job and my pension is still the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
So many questions, so many things to dive into. And in particular, this notion that you talked about of believing that talent is something that is only inherently given to folks, and only the folks with this special magical gift bestowed upon them will be able to make a living as a artist or as a creative. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and what shifted that mindset for you?
Yeah, two things shifted the mindset. The one was just actually being exposed to the whole idea of the growth mindset. And it was from an artist by the name of Harley Brown, a successful Canadian artist. And I was reading an interview with him, and he said, it's not about talent. Like this whole idea of natural talent's a myth. Your talent is just the sum total of your skills, knowledge, creativity, and experience, and you can increase all those. And he said, if you're willing to work hard enough, he said, I 100% guarantee you'll be successful. And part of me thought, to heck with you, Harley Brown. Like, you're one of those gifted people, right? But again, that little voice in the back of my head said, what if he's right? And even then I was thinking, okay, maybe then I'll do my 35 years as a police officer. And when I retire, then I can maybe get back to my art. And then tragedy struck. A good friend of mine who was the same age as me, he was killed in the line of duty on the police force. And all of a sudden, the idea of putting this dream off for another 20 years that might not come just didn't seem right. It just does. I knew, I get choked up when I talk about this because I remember thinking, if that had been me, and then they were going to my funeral, no one would have mentioned anything about me being an artist. A lot of my friends didn't even know I was an artist. I was an artist, but I wasn't painting, but I knew that's who I was inside. And so I just really made the decision. Like I say, I thought, like, I didn't walk away from my police job for 3 years until I'd really bought. By then, it's holy geez, they're right. It all just is about work. And then now I frame it, and I really tried, like, that's when I discovered the power of the word yet, which I think is one of the most powerful words in the English language, because whenever we tell ourselves that we are something or are not enough of something, and so not talented, when I decided I wasn't talented enough to be an artist, I was 100% right if I'd added the word yet on the end of it. I wasn't talented enough yet, but you can become talented. And the fact that your talent is kind of limitless. And so I bought into it. It worked for me, right? Like, I've sold several $1 million of my art. I just had a painting that's going into the collection at King Charles, which is pretty cool. But the most important thing for me is, since I started my art academy, I've seen a number of artists go from just serious hobby painters but who always had the dream, had the passion. And again, all of them also felt, I'm not talented enough. And they were right, but they ended up buying in to the idea. They really worked on it. And a number of them now are just like kicking butt. One of my students, she was one of the first ones to join the Art Academy. She just last year, she did $80,000 in profit from her art, as well as winning the $50,000 first prize in the Kellogg art competition. And she's 23 years old, and she was studying to be a veterinarian because that was her plan B. And then after seeing one more of my YouTube videos where I said, if you want it bad enough, you can do it, she thought, well, give it a try. And there's a number of stories like that within the academy. There's one of my ladies that's the same age as me. She started painting 3 years ago. She'd always had an interest in it, but never really believed or whatever. And so she was retired, took it up, started painting, period, 3 years ago. And she's done over $50,000 in sales of her artwork this year. And this is in a world where a recent survey said that 80% of self-described full-time artists sell less than $10,000 of their art in a year. So that like the starving artist is alive and real, but it doesn't have to be.
So that's actually a fantastic point, and it could be pretty cool. That's what we love to emphasize. It is not necessarily, or the notion of the starving artist being the norm or the what has to happen is, especially now, is not what the norm has to be.
Oh, and not at all. But it still is what it is.
Sure. Yeah. I would love for you to talk a little bit about this sort of 3-year crossfade transition from your law enforcement work to your art practice.
Sure.
Many folks listening are in positions where, of course, they have the passion, they have the desire, they have the talent even, but given the realities of financials, having to make sure there is something steady coming in, they are working other jobs, other full-time positions. So tell us a little bit about how that journey started for you and how you balanced your sort of full-time career with working in your art practice.
Yeah, and because again, when I started, I had no thought of leaving the police force. I thought this is something I can work towards so that when I retire, I'll have something to fall back on. But the first question I had to ask, and this is what people out there, if they're in this thing and they're thinking, that's me, I really want to do this, but it's like, what do you paint, right? What do you paint? And so I was a detective in the fraud squad investigating frauds over $2 million. So very analytical, right? So I just bought all kinds of books. I subscribed to all kinds of magazines when I was going through this process, just learning voraciously everything I could about both the technical aspect of creating art as well as the business side and what to paint. And the answer always came back the same thing. Start with painting what you love. And so I had 2 little boys. They were like 3 and 5 years old. So I started painting pictures of my boys. And then one of the very first ones I did, that got into a show and it won an award. And then I started painting pictures of friends and family and stuff. And then they started buying them. And then I started doing portrait commissions. And so when I left the police force, I thought that's what I was going to be doing. I was going to become a full-time professional portrait painter because, like I said, I'd already been elected as a senior status in the Canadian Portrait Society. And then a funny thing happened. It's like about a year and a half in of painting portraits, I realized I loved painting pictures of my kids. I loved painting pictures of people the way I wanted to paint them. Because initially when I started off, I would just take wherever I was, I had a camera with me. I went out and got a good 35 millimeter camera, an SLR, before DSLRs. And I would always just be taking pictures of friends and families, and then I would paint them. And then I would just let them know, I've done a painting of you. If you're interested, it's available for sale, very cheap. And I love doing that. But then I started taking on commissions. And all of a sudden now I was painting other people's people the way they wanted me to paint them. And it was no longer what I wanted to do. And often it was cringeworthy, the specifications. I remember doing one painting. It was a commission portrait. It was of an old English sheepdog. It was a watercolor, but the sheepdog had a party hat on his head and had the name Barney. She wanted that in big letters across the bottom of it. And at this point, I was the president of the Canadian Society of Painters of Watercolor. And I was thinking, oh my God, once again, this was not the dream, right? And I have to say, too, that during that 3-year period, I started doing caricatures of police officers. And so it got to be a thing by the time I left that if someone was being promoted or if they were retiring anywhere where I worked, it's like, Tim, can you do us a caricature? And I'd actually get a day off. I'd bring my stuff in, and I was doing like half sheet watercolor caricatures. And we had it honed down to a thing like that. I would do that. And on the day of like their retirement or promotion party, I would bring the caricature, but I'd also have the frame and the mat, and everyone would come in the back room and they would all sign around the mat. And then I would pop the painting into the mat, into the frame, have it ready, and then we'd present it to the person at the end of during the party. And then as I started to become known for doing this and people knew I was an artist, then I got involved in doing some paintings for charity. For the Toronto Police Force had a charity fundraising tournament with the Toronto Maple Leafs, the hockey team, every year. But during that 3-year period too, I was learning voraciously, but through books and magazines, because this was pre-internet. I had a stack of books, probably 4 feet high, about painting in oils, painting in watercolor, painting portraits, painting landscapes, watercolor techniques. And I subscribed to about probably 5 or 6 magazines every month and would just go through those. And the big thing that I did, because I was working full time at this point, is scheduling to paint at least 3 times a week, because I'd read that somewhere. And it makes sense because I'm into working out, and it's the same sort of thing, right? You can't go and do a 10-hour workout once a month and expect to improve. And by the same way, you can't go and binge paint over a weekend every 2 months and expect to improve. But if you can paint 3 times a week, even if it's just for a couple hours, then that momentum just builds, and you're not waiting long enough that you get rusty before the next painting session. So that was all of the stuff that I was doing. And then it was in 1999, I guess that's when I got elected to the Portrait Society, plus the Canadian Watercolor Society. Plus I got into a juried show that was held by the Federation of Canadian Artists for the Millennium, that was some of the biggest artists in the world got in, the people that I just looked up to. And I got in a show with them. And so that's when both my wife and I started thinking, you know what? We started thinking about when, not if. And this was in the fall of 1999. So it's okay. How about January 1st, 2000? Let's start the millennium as a full-time artist.
So you talked a lot about how you developed your creative practice as a painter, as an artist. But alongside that, you're talking about the networks that you were joining, and you eventually became president of a network, and you were selling things and doing things for charity. How did you learn about the entrepreneurial skills that go along with being an art professional? How did you learn this is what I should price my work for? This is how I should budget for materials? Did that sort of come naturally? How did that work?
That came from mentors. And so this is something I really want. I get choked up when I talk about this. But when I got elected to the Canadian Watercolor Society in 1999, and they were having a big symposium off the coast of Vancouver on Bowen Island, and the election was in the summer. And so I said to my wife, if I get elected, I want to go in this symposium. And Diane was like, yeah, if you get elected, you can go, right? And I'd got into their international juried show earlier that year. And when I went down to pick up my painting, couple of the people that were really encouraging me to apply for membership. And the membership, you were voted on by the members about whether or not you'd be accepted. So when I did get elected, and then I was going on this trip, and I went in, it was so funny. I went in the day before I was leaving on this trip to Bowen Island. It was in October. And I went in to see my boss, who was the unit commander of the fraud squad. And I said, I just want to let you know I'm leaving in the new year. And it was funny. He said, where are you going? Hold up, homicide, gang squad? And I said, no, I'm quitting. And he went, oh, yeah, the art thing. And so anyways, when I left to go on this trip, I was just like so excited because I'd put it out there in public that I'm quitting at the end of the year. And then I was going on this trip with all these professional artists. And it was a symposium where there were instructors, but really it was all elected members of the society going there. So everybody there pretty much were already professional artists. And so anyways, I thought my goal was, if I can find one person on this trip, and it was like a 9-day trip where we just painted, I thought if I can find one person to mentor me, then that would be great. And I came back with a fistful of mentors in my pocket. And I think they could tell too, that they just knew how thrilled I was and knew what, when you meet someone that's made that kind of a step, right? They're like, oh, this guy's serious. And then they were initially, the very first thing everybody said is, you got to talk to Linda Kemp, because she's probably the best at business of anybody in the society. And she was actually one of the instructors there. So I went over and introduced myself to her. And then she became one of my mentors in those early years about all the business side of things. But then here's the most important thing. I was asked right when I was on that symposium if I would volunteer and consider coming on the board. And I'm thinking, what do they want with me? I'm just this dumb copper. And I'm still, imposter syndrome was really, they're going to find out they've made a terrible mistake and ask for my diploma back. But I was courted when I got back. I got taken out to lunch at the Arts and Letters Club, which is like a huge thing in Toronto. It's where the Group of Seven was formed by one of the board members. And he asked me to volunteer for the show committee. And then the next year asked me to come on the board. And I realized at the time why they wanted me on there. I'm sure they found me very infectious and all that kind of stuff. But the main thing was, like, the majority of the members were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we hang a lot of shows. And here I was, this big strapping young guy, and they were like, he looks like he can lift a lot. And there's a lot of work that goes into, like when we have a show, stuff gets shipped in from all over the world. It's got to be uncrated. It's got to be transported. It's got to be hung. And so I know, and I've talked to them since then, yeah, they just said, we need this guy on the hanging committee. But when I did then come on the board, and then I served on the board for 10 years, eventually 2 years as vice president and 2 years as president, I got access to some of Canada's most successful, most prolific artists, and I just picked their brains all the time, nonstop. And so that's one of the things that I want to get out there to people. And this was a juried kind of organization, so it was hard to get into. But even if you're just in a local art guild or whatever, because I did that in my local art guild, I ended up coming on the board and serving as president. Because when you volunteer, and now you're rubbing shoulders, and the other people that are in the board or volunteering are usually the more successful people. So when you get in a situation like this, where you're in an organization, like volunteering and being involved and behind the scenes, don't do it because you're not doing it to give back. Do it for selfish reasons, because you will learn a lot more. And if you're just someone who's in the organization and sitting out on the fringe, you won't be involved in all of the stuff that goes on in terms of like running shows and all of this kind of stuff. But not only that, the people who have the information you want, they're going to be less likely to give you their time if you're not giving your time to whatever group you're in.
So staying on the mentorship track for a moment, a big proponent of Could Be Pretty Cool is the sort of like lift as you climb mentality.
Yep.
No matter where you are in your career, there's somebody who, as you said, just may want to pick your brain, or something that you just may know you're a few steps ahead of someone else. But I would love to know, when did you first get the spark for your academy? And if you could tell us a little bit more about the activities and the things that you do to help mentor the next generation of arts entrepreneurs.
So this all kind of happened for me. Again, for me, it was all just about me, right? Trying to get my career, trying to get to the point where I was actually successful. So I initially taught some workshops early on when I was just trying to make any money from my art. But at a certain point, once my art took off, it was no longer financially viable. I couldn't make as much money in a weekend teaching a workshop as I could make just going home and painting. So I quit the teaching for a long time. And then in 2015, I'd had a really good year, and I was at an opening at a swanky gallery in downtown Toronto, right in the Arts District. And it was like the TV version that, as artists growing up, we all dream about, having a night like this. So the gallery was regularly open, like from 10 in the morning till 5 at night. And so at 5 o'clock, the gallery closed, but it was opening for the opening of the show at 7. And so at 6 o'clock, I had my easel and paint set up in the front window that looked right on York Avenue in Toronto. And I was painting in the front window for that last hour before the show started. And at 22, I could see people starting to line up. And by the time the doors opened, there was probably 40 or 50 people lined up outside the gallery waiting to come in. And they also had a team of waiters ready with trays of wine. There was someone playing guitar. The doors opened and people streamed in, and very quickly red dots started going up on paintings as pieces sold. And I was just sitting there, and I was just like basking in the glow, just thinking, oh my God, like this was the dream. I can't believe this is happening. And then I did some quick crunching of the numbers, and I realized I was going to make over $250,000 that year from the sale of my art. And it was very funny. That kind of basking in the glow only lasted for a short period of time. And then I got this other feeling that was actually a little uncomfortable. And at first I thought maybe I was guilty or what, but it wasn't. The feeling that came over me was responsibility, because I thought, I'm not special. There's nothing about me that was special that made me be able to do this. But I knew the things that I had done to get here. And I thought, and I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, where my favorite thing of his is karma is practical, right? And so I decided I need to start giving back. So literally the next day I went into Vistec, told them I want to start creating high quality YouTube videos. And I dropped about $25,000 in equipment because that was pre-smartphone days. So anyways, literally that week, I started my YouTube channel. And my YouTube channel was all just about sharing everything I'd learned about becoming an artist. And there was no thought of monetizing it. I was just doing this to give back, but I was doing it as a bit of a passion project. So it was only getting the time available in my away from pain, only a little amount of time, no money really invested in it other than the equipment or anything. And it's like I'm doing this as a give back and thinking that if I build it, they will come. And it's kind of, no, not really. So it didn't really grow very quickly. And then again, I discovered Gary Vaynerchuk and social media. So then I started really getting active in social media, mainly to push the YouTube channel. But what ended up happening, it just grew my following of people who love my art. That anyways, my career was going great. But I was still just doing the teaching as a side thing and no thought of adding it as a revenue stream and thinking that was being noble, right? There's even YouTube videos out there of me saying, I will never charge to teach. I'm going to make my money off my rich clients, not off the backs of starving artists. And then in 2017, I had the opportunity to actually mentor a young artist. Her name's Brooke Cormier. And she's a superstar now on social media, the art world, everything else. But her dad was a golfing buddy of mine. And he knew I was involved in the arts, but didn't really know that much. And we were golfing one day, and he said to me, oh, do you know anybody that does fine art printing? And I said, yeah, I do fine art printing. We publish all my own prints. And so he said, Brooke has done a painting for her grandfather of this very well-known scene near our cottage. And people on the road have seen it, and some of them said they might be interested in doing prints. Could you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. No problem. And so he brought Brooke over. I'd never met her before. And so I just walked her through the process of, I said, we'll shoot the photographs. We'll do a proof of the print. And then if you like it, then we can go ahead and do the prints for you. So we talked about how many and the pricing. So we decided she was going to do 25 prints. So she left and she came back the next week to see the proof, and she loved the proof. And she said, when can I have all 25 prints? And I said, you don't need them all right now. You can sell them. And as you sell the prints, we can print on demand. And she said, no, I've already sold all 25. And I went, oh, I like this girl. So we did the prints. And then and she was studying to become a landscape architect because she'd loved art. She'd only ever taken like high school art classes. And she was what I would consider like a fairly accomplished hobby painter. But of course, her parents and her guidance counselors told her you can't make a living as an artist. So if you go into landscape architecture, you'll at least have some of that creative outlet. And so over the course of the next couple of years, a few times she came out and golfed with like me and her dad and my wife and her mom too. They were all members at the same private club. And we did a couple little print jobs for her. And then in the spring after she graduated, I was golfing with her dad. And I could tell he wasn't happy, and he wasn't happy with me. And he looks at me and he says, we spoke to Brooke last night. I said, oh, how's she doing? He said, I can tell you one thing. She doesn't want to be a landscape architect. She wants to be an artist. And I could just see the thought bubble over his head, which was, and it's all your fault. And he's, what do you think we should do about this? And I said, realistically, like she was still living at home. She didn't have any debt from university. And I said, you know what? If she's ever going to try this, now is the time. She's living at home with you guys. She doesn't have a lot of expenses. She can get a part-time job or whatever. But I knew she had the work ethic. Every time I talked to her, I could just see the fire in her belly about art. And her dad would actually come over and say, leave Tim alone, because she was always just asking questions about art. And I said, I think that she has what it takes to succeed. And then I just said to him, I said, if you ask her if she's willing, I'll mentor her, as long as she's willing for us to film all of our sessions for my YouTube channel. And so that's what we did. So we met every month and we posted them all on YouTube, which I'm so glad we did, because when I tell people this story, it doesn't sound real. But by the end of her first year, she made over $30,000 as an artist. It took me 5 years to hit that. After I'd already been painting seriously for 3 years, achieved all of this stuff, it took me 5 years to hit that number. And by her second year, she was way beyond that. She was selling limited edition prints of her work around the world. Now she's got like over 500,000 followers on social media. She's living in Vienna, just living her dream. And so that's where I really discovered what worked for me can work to other people. And then in 19, that was the year of the thyroid from hell, where I almost died twice. So twice during that year, I was lying on the gurney in the hospital, my wife there, and neither of us knowing if I was going to be here 10 or 15 minutes later. And so the great thing about that, though, there is a lot of great things, is the feeling that I had when I thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to be here 10 minutes from now, was just gratitude. It was like, I'm not ready to go, but if this is it, thank you for whatever is responsible for allowing me to live a life where I'd achieved all of my dreams. I had a wonderful marriage. I had 2 boys, and I thought, okay, this is going to be hard on them. I don't want to go. But I got more out of life than most people get. I got to live my dream and experience success on a level I never dreamed possible. And then everything did work out. At the end of that 2 years, for a long time, I couldn't paint. But while I was there, you do a lot of soul searching. When that happens, you're not so concerned about what am I going to post today. You're more, am I really doing what I want to be doing I've been given a second chance here. And that's when I thought, you know what? There was one regret. And that was like, I had helped Brooke on her journey, changed her life. And I had received many emails from people, even just from my YouTube channel, that I changed their life. But I was still just doing that as a part-time side thing, not really dedicating a lot of effort to it. And again, thinking that I was being noble and giving it away for free. And then someone actually told me, Tim, you're being very selfish. It's like, how many more people do you think you could help if instead of just giving this a little bit of your time, if you were to dedicate most or all of your time to doing that? But if you do that, you're going to have to turn it into a business, and you're just going to have to get over yourself that the fact that you're going to have to charge for this. So I made the decision. I said, if I get through this healthy, I am going to make the shift to teaching being kind of full-time, at least until I can have it up and running as a successful business, and then I will get back to spending more time painting. And so that's why in 2020, we launched the Art Academy. We just, in December, passed $600,000 in lifetime earnings on sales of the course. And now all of my students have been bugging me, like, we need a book. It's great that you've got all these courses online, but if I want to find out specific information about pricing my work or doing a studio open house or seeking influences, I got to go through all your courses and try and find where that is. And they said, you can give us a book. We can just flip to that chapter, and there it is. So I started in January of last year, writing the book. And yeah, it launches January of this year. And yeah.
Amazing. I love that reframing of guilt to responsibility, because that's something that no one really talks about in our field. We want the success, we want the acclaim. And then sometimes when we get whatever the equivalent of the dream is for us, it's, oh crap, I got it. Am I supposed to? Oh, but my friend didn't. Oh, now I feel that. And so I love that, from guilt to responsibility. Now, how do I help other people?
And you know what I found, that at least in the arts, because artists have a bad rap of being like the pretentious artist that you need certain type of lighting there. And we need, just like movie stars, which some of them are, with that whole kind of the delicate genius that we have to, and we can't bother them or whatever. But I found that level of pretentiousness, I haven't seen it very often, but it's always in inverse proportion to the actual talent and success. The most talented, most successful artists that I have met are the ones that are the most giving, that are most willing to reach down and help someone else out that's on the path. And they also believe in that whole thing of abundance, that there's enough for everyone. Like, your success does not threaten mine. I actually had people ask me, like, how do you feel the fact that, okay, you're doing okay, you've got 90,000 followers on social media, and Brooke's got over 500,000. I'm like, I feel freaking amazing. It's like, that was the goal, right? Like, it shouldn't threaten you, both when you are helping people. If they surpass you, it's like, great. But also when you see other people experiencing success, right? That you don't have a hand in, or you don't know whether, and you have a choice to make, whether that's going to be a sting or that's going to be a spark to motivate you. You can decide to let envy come in and go, oh, and make, oh, I bet. I've had people say to me, oh yeah, of course Brooke made successful because her dad was a member at a private golf course and they were rich and he had all his art buddies. It's like, he was a fireman. It's like, he doesn't have a group of art buddies to promote her work. You can react that way, or you can do what I have done my whole career, which is, if they can do it, I can do it. And then I just find out, how do I find out how they did it?
So my final question for you is, this year for us, our theme is transitions and experiments, particularly here in the States, but I guess globally. Yeah. Lots of stuff is going on, both good and fascinating, that is going to impact the careers of independent artists and creatives. And so I would love if you have any advice for someone who's listening and they're maybe in a position where they're like, I have been meaning to take that leap, or yes, I do want to do it, but I want to do it in like a slow transition. Yeah. Or what advice do you have for that artist or creative to potentially help to motivate them to like take those steps, whatever they look like for them?
The number one thing I would say is that when you're a creative and you want to make your living as a creative person, it's very different than if you have a job as a police officer, right? For me, there's an end game and there's a pension. If you have a startup, there's a buyout at the end. Whereas if you're a creative, the only reason to want to make your living doing what you love is that's the only way you will be able to do what you love every day. So you can win the lottery, you can marry a rich spouse who's very supportive, or you can figure out a way to make a living doing the thing that you're doing. But then the end goal is just to play the infinite game. You just always want to be able to get up the next day in the game. So you never want to take risks that if it doesn't work out, it knocks you out of the game. So you don't want to just on a whim mortgage your house, open a gallery and see, hey, I wonder if I can make a go at this. You do it in stages, and you have to ask yourself three things. Is there a real desire or demand for this thing I want to do? If the only one that's ever bought your paintings is your mom so far, then this is probably not the time to think about going professionally. It doesn't mean you can't one day get there, but if you've proved that there is a demand for whatever it is you're doing, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a singer, songwriter, artist, whatever, if you're getting that demand, so that's the one thing. And the other thing is, do you really love doing it? Because sometimes we can for me, that was like with portraits. I was very good at portraits, but I reached a point where I would rather have root canal than paint another portrait. And it's if you're doing something you don't love, there are a lot of easier and better ways to make money than being an artist or whatever. And then the last thing is, if I take this step and it doesn't work out, am I going to be okay and still able to keep playing the game? And so for us, it was when I made the leap from the police force, my wife had a very good job. She was like one level below a VP at a bank. And okay, we could survive without her. We needed both incomes to live the lifestyle we were used to, but we weren't going to lose our house. So you want to do it incrementally in stages that make sense so that you can just keep playing the game. That's the goal, is to just keep playing the game every day, to be able to get up and do what it is you want to do. And then I would say too, the biggest thing, and it's probably the same in all of the creative fields, is knowing the three different modes that we create in. And that's practice, process, and product. And so like for practice, for an artist, it'd be like one of the things, even when I was in college, it's like you need to keep a daily sketchbook and draw for half an hour every day. You're not creating anything you could sell. You're just doing the reps to work on a specific skill. And same with life drawing classes. And then there's product mode. That's where you're trying to create the best painting that you can, or the best film or best commercial or best social media post, whatever. But when you're doing that, you're only using those skills, concepts, techniques that you are competent and confident in. And if you do that, whatever the bar is where you've said, this is a really good painting for me, you should be able to hit pretty close to that all the time. But the problem is you will be at that exact same level 10, 20 years from now, because we don't grow in product mode. And this is where process mode comes in. And process mode is anytime we're doing something that we are not competent in, we're not confident in. It's the first time we're trying something. And you have to identify what mode you're in, because here's the important thing. In process mode, there's a high risk of failure because you're doing something you don't know how to do. And in process mode, you're supposed to fail. And failing, people should just change failing with learning, right? Most artists, they get to the point when they can produce pretty good work, right? Work where people go, oh, that's nice. Work where a few people they'll sell a few paintings. But then what do? They stop learning, they stop pushing, and they go, now I'm going to try and make a living as an artist, and I'm going to try to make a living on this pretty good art. And the world of starving artists is full of pretty good. The key is you just keep on that cycle of improving, of pushing your creativity, of trying new things until you reach that moment. And when you reach that moment, the world is not shy about letting you know.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Well, Tim,
I told you that I wouldn't have any quick answers.
no, this is amazing. And I think in particular for the start of the year, for the start of a year of what I'm sure is going to be full of transitions and just new things for so many folks listening, I think this is a perfect way to really set the tone and set some intentions for the folks who are serious about making a career out of their art. And so I would love for you to tell everyone listening, how can they find out more about you, your work? How can they connect with what you're up to?
Okay, so my art academy is at www.timpackerartacademy.com. So if they go there, they can also see my book. So we're just launching my book. And we're also, again, I'm just committed to helping people. I want to make this such a no-brainer. For now, for a limited time, if people buy the book, so during launch week, it's $2.99 for the ebook, $9.99 for the paperback, and then it's going up after the launch window. But we are going to leave for quite a while some bonuses there. And I have a whole course that I've put together called Creating Your Plan for Success. And this course regularly retails for $199. It comes with worksheets as well. If they buy the book, there's a link at the end of the book to get that course for free. The whole course, nothing, just for free. Because again, my goal now is to just help artists. And I want this book to do really well. So and if they just go to my website, they can see that at the Tim Packer Art Academy, or on Amazon. You can just search for You Can Sell Your Art. That's the name of the book. And they will see that there. And then I have a number of levels in my art academy as well, right up to my mastermind group that we call the Hungry Artists Community. And that's where people get everything that I produce. So all of my courses, the book, kind of everything, some special stuff that only they get as well. And then I also do a weekly live Zoom call where I'll answer questions, critique people's work, and give coaching advice. And we just yesterday was my first Zoom call of the year. And it was a 3-hour call with everybody, but dealing with setting your goals and objectives for the new year. You're right. That's why we're releasing the book in January. Because this is the time, it's really important. And that's the one thing I would say too, for anybody that has a dream, right? It's only a dream until you put a plan together. You actually have to have a plan. You need to set goals. You need to set objectives, and you need to set the right ones in the right order. It's like, there's no point trying to teach a bunch of grade 3 kids trigonometry when they don't know basic math yet, right? So doing the things in the right order that makes the most sense can really fast forward the process. And so I would say to anybody that has a dream of doing anything in the creative world is you need to have a plan. And where do you get the plan? It's look for someone. I'm stealing blatantly from Alex Hormozy here. It's look for someone who's done the thing you want to do, but also someone who has had success in helping other people do the thing you want to do. So whether it's a filmmaker, whether it's writing music, whether it's copywriting, whether it's illustration, whether it's fashion design or whatever, someone that's done the thing, but who's also shown that they're good at helping others do that, find them. And then at the very least, just look at what they did in their career and copy that. But ideally, because now so many people have YouTube channels, right? There's a very good chance you can find a lot of content for free. Like I've got, I think now 350 videos on my YouTube channel. You never have to spend a dime with me to learn everything I'm saying. But if you want that kind of more kind of in-depth kind of contact in the courses, then of course, yeah, we're doing it there. But most people that are out there that have had success and who have helped other people, I think they at some point also feel that responsibility. So whether they write a book or whether they have a podcasts are also great. Just this, right? Listening to people who have got to where you want to go. And that's the best way to learn how to do it, is listen to a bunch of people and you'll find, wow, there's a lot of common threads. They all did this. They all did this. They all did that. I should be writing this down. That's my plan for the new year.
I can't think of a better way to end this particular podcast. So thank you so much for coming on. Dropped a lot of gems for folks. And yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for having me.
There's a lot to sit with from the conversation. And here are a few things that stuck with me. First, the power of yet. Tim talked about how adding that one word changes everything. I'm not talented enough becomes I'm not talented enough yet. You're acknowledging where you are while leaving room for where you're going. Second, the crossfade approach. Tim didn't quit his police job and hope for the best. He spent 3 years building his art practice alongside his day job, proving the concept before making the leap. There's wisdom in being strategic about a major life transition. Third, this idea that it's only a dream until you put a plan together. A lot of us carry creative ambitions, but ambition without a roadmap stays wishful thinking. Tim's point about finding someone who's done what you want to do and who's helped others do it is practical advice worth taking seriously. And finally, most artists quit at pretty good. The starving artist myth persists partly because too many creators stop developing once they can produce competent work. Tim's framework of cycling through practice, process, and product mode, that's how you move from pretty good to undeniable. If you want to go deeper on what we've covered today, head over to our Substack at couldbeprettycoolnews.substack.com, where we break down each episode with more detailed analysis and provide practical tips you can actually use. Plus, it's the best way to stay in the loop on everything Could Be Pretty Cool, new episodes, upcoming guests, and the projects we're working on. This has been Could Be Pretty Cool. Until next time, keep nurturing the process. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production. Created, hosted, and executive produced by Casey Lueders. Senior producer is Liz Moore, and supervising sound editor is Trinity Jackson. Our original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis and cover art design by AJ Johnson. To learn more about Could Be Pretty Cool and discover whatever else we're up to, visit us at couldbeprettycool.substack.com. Thank you for listening.